So we are well into this journey now. And in case you haven't been here the whole way or could use a little recap, this series is moving us through 6 qualities called paramitas. And it's based on ancient wisdom from the Mahāyāna Buddhist tradition. And although the most common translation of the word paramita is perfection, we've been approaching these qualities as liberating qualities that are already seated within every one of us. And so what we're up to is simply learning how to tend the conditions that these seeds need to grow. So far, we've explored 3 of these 6 qualities and started to see how deeply interrelated they are. We started with Dāna, or generosity, which invited us to notice what is truly ours to give, and then to let it move in a way that nourishes rather than depletes. We also explored Sīla, which we're holding as wholeness, and asked whether that movement is aligned with what matters most. And then Kṣānti last time, or patient inclusiveness, which asked us to trust the pace of that alignment. So to stay with what is slow or unresolved or uncomfortable and widen at our edges, just a little at a time, to include what's actually here. And today, we're going to explore a quality that moves towards what is life-giving and liberating, and distinguish how that might be different from effort that is driven by pressure or obligation or fear. So this quality is known as Vīrya. And as usual, we're going to start with the word itself. So Vīrya is most often translated as effort, diligence, energy, sometimes perseverance. And in the Tibetan tradition, it is sometimes described as joyful exertion. So for this series, we're going to lean in that direction, and we're going to hold it as joyful engagement. And I want to say a few words about why that particular framing feels important. As we've explored before, and we talk about this a lot here in different ways, we live in a cultural context that has a kind of relentless focus on productivity, on achievement, on performance. And because of this, it can be so easy to absorb beliefs that our value is measured by output. Maybe that rest is weakness. Or that if we aren't improving and progressing or getting somewhere other than where we are all the time, that we're somehow falling short. And under these kinds of conditions, many of us, I'm going to absolutely raise my hand here, may have taken these messages in so deeply that it doesn't only affect our work. It can shape our relationships, our self-concept, our practice, and even our sense of purpose in the world. And this, I think, is a good part of why so many people arrive at burnout in our modern times. Not just career exhaustion, but a deep depletion of the very meaning and vitality that drew us towards what we care about in the first place, right? So joyful engagement is pointing us towards something different. Although I want to be clear that this isn't a teaching about only doing what's easy or waiting until we feel inspired to participate with life. So Vīrya is still effort. It includes diligence and the willingness to show up and to keep showing up. But it also asks us to look carefully at the source of our effort. So not just the effort itself, because the how and the why in this case are at least as important as the what. And the truth is, I know many people, and again, I will absolutely include myself here, who have committed themselves to meaningful, purposeful efforts, but ultimately done so with an energy that caused a degree of harm. And quite often that is to ourselves, right? So this can look a lot of ways. Few examples. Maybe we care for others in a way that involves sacrificing our own well-being. Or we work in service of a cause that we really believe in, but then we push past exhaustion and into collapse. And this can be anything. We might even meditate from a place of striving or avoidance. So the practice becomes less about presence and meeting what's here, and more about kind of rejecting or trying to get away from the reality of our lives. And so Vīrya invites us to ask not only what are we giving our energy to, but also how and why and from where is that energy being drawn? And here we're going to come back once again to the power of the pause and the reliable wisdom of the body. When we make room to tune in to the felt sense, we discover that when effort is driven by fear or pressure or some belief that we aren't enough, what happens in the body? You might reflect on this, right? It tends to create, for me, tightness, kind of contraction. There can be a really soul-tired depletion that shows up in the body. We might also notice thoughts or feelings that start to have a lot of story, like if I stop pushing, something's going to fall apart, or I'm going to fall behind, or maybe I'm going to lose my value or worthiness in some fundamental way. So even when the action itself is admirable or important, that kind of effort can become extractive in that it pulls from our life force without replenishing it. And when we can zoom out enough to see the broader picture, we begin to recognize that what is harmful to one part of the web of life, and this certainly includes the person who's engaged in the effort, if it is harmful there, it cannot truly be beneficial to the whole. I want to take a minute to pause with that, because it can be painful to really take that in. I mean, it has been for me. I think of the years that I spent of my life engaged in meaningful efforts, connected to things that really mattered to me, but in a way that extracted so much from my body and my heart and my mind. And I feel a lot of grief in the understanding that inevitably I was not the only one harmed through those monumental efforts to do something good. So that's why it feels so important to look at this holistically and to have the courage to be honest about impact. And this connects back to what we explored with Dāna, actually, because just as not all giving is true generosity, not all effort is Vīrya. So we learned that true Dāna is giving that participates in that reciprocal flow, rather than giving that extracts more than we have to offer. And Vīrya has a really similar quality. It is effort that serves a larger well-being, rather than effort that either treats the self as something to be used up in the name of being good, or maybe productive, even spiritual, or effort that prioritizes only our personal preferences or priorities, or the people that are in our immediate circle, and kind of ignores those wider ripples. So this is different, you know? Again, this kind of effort might not always feel easy or joyful in this ordinary sense of being cheerful and light. But underneath it, there is a wise, sincere, heartful willingness. And when we tune in a sense of, yes, this matters and is worth my time or my care or my attention, and yes, this way of engaging includes a broader perspective of impact and well-being. So discernment, it's really important here. To use some Buddhist language, Vīrya is often described as energy that is directed towards what is wholesome. And by wholesome, this doesn't mean morally pure or correct in some rigid or perfectionistic sense. It means skillful, nourishing, or compassionate. And essentially, when we zoom out, kind of leading towards more well-being rather than more suffering, okay? And this is another place that Vīrya again draws on the paramitas that we've already explored to serve as helpful filters. So in cooperation with Dāna, it asks, is this effort coming from what is truly available? Such an important question. With Sīla, it asks, is it aligned with what I most deeply value? So with what really matters. With Kṣānti, it asks, can I stay with the pace and the difficulty of this as it is, without forcing or fleeing or kind of hardening? And rather than being a cognitive analysis, these are questions that we can sense into in a pretty simple, maybe kind of a directional way. Like, is this effort rooted in fear or in love? Make it really simple. Or does it move towards truth and care and liberation, or away from them in the other direction? So this is the kind of effort that Vīrya points towards. Effort with heart and wisdom, an effort that can be sustained because it is connected to love, ultimately. And although this teaching, to me, feels especially relevant in a time when so many people are burned out and suffering due to systems of constant productivity, exertion, low capitalism, it's not only a modern reframe. So some of you may have heard there's a very famous teacher, Śāntideva, an 8th century Buddhist teacher, who devoted an entire chapter of his great teaching on the Bodhisattva path to Vīrya. And in it, he names some of the main forces that block this quality. So avoidance, distraction, and he also talks a lot about discouragement, including that painful inner voice that insists we're not up to the task. This is more than we can take on. But what has always stuck with me about his teaching is that one of the central antidotes he highlights to these barriers is joy. So not joy as some kind of performance of enthusiasm or, as I said before, spiritual cheerfulness, but the steady joy that arises when we connect with the meaning and the goodness of whatever it is that we're practicing. And here, Śāntideva gives an image that I find both really inspiring and kind of unexpected. He compares the bodhisattva engaged in practice to a child absorbed in play. So not trying hard to be joyful, okay? But simply, fully, undividedly absorbed, with no gap between the effort and the enjoyment. So play, that feels so revolutionary to me. And in a more contemporary voice, I hear the same quality in Joanna Macy's teachings on active hope. I know we've talked about that quite a bit here too. So hope, not as optimism, but as something we do. A way of giving ourselves to what we love and what we care about, not because we're certain of success, but because showing up for what matters is in itself life-affirming. And to me, this is such a clear expression of Vīrya on the bodhisattva path. That kind of love-fueled engagement with life, even when the outcome is uncertain. Because as we know, the bodhisattva vow, not just about waking up for ourselves, it's about living in service of reducing suffering for all beings. And Vīrya is the energy that helps us keep showing up for that vow without hardening or collapsing or burning out. And when we look to nature for a living model of what it looks like when effort and joy are not separate, gosh, I had so many things come up here, but one fantastic example that we're going to explore today is the sea otter. Now, something to know about sea otters is that they eat a lot. And this is because they have a very high metabolic rate and they don't have much insulation to keep them warm. So they need to eat roughly 20 to 30% of their body weight every single day. So their lives involve a tremendous amount of effort. They are continually diving and then surfacing and foraging, cracking open shellfish. They do this really cute thing where they choose a particular stone and then they tuck it under their arm so that they have the stone available. Ah, I love sea otters. And then they're breeding and they're grooming and they're diving again, right? So just this really continual kind of motion and effort is necessary for their lives. And yet, at least to my human eyes, it is almost impossible to watch a sea otter and see dutiful labor. Like, that's not what this looks like. There is something in their full-bodied, exuberant way of being where effort and enjoyment seem really deeply connected. And I think this is probably why in many coastal indigenous cultures, otters are seen as a symbol of the sacred importance of childlike delight. Otters show us that play and curiosity and responsiveness and that whole-bodied presence are not distractions from cultivating well-being. They're part of it. This is what flourishing looks like in an otter from the outside. And here's where this teaching deepens even more. So sea otters are considered what's called a keystone species, because by feeding on sea urchins, which just happen to be their favorite meal, they help protect kelp forests from being overgrazed. And those kelp forests provide shelter and food and habitat for a whole giant web of coastal life. So the otter's wholehearted way of living doesn't just nourish their own bodies. It simultaneously supports the larger ecosystem. And it's not because the otter is calculating outcomes or getting really serious about performing an ecological service, right? The otter's living its life. It's following what draws it. And because of that, and that truth of interbeing, that none of us are separate from, its deep, wholesome nourishment is the same nourishment that nourishes the wider web of life. To me, this is such a beautiful living image of Vīrya. So not the avoidance of effort, and also not effort that depletes the one engaging in it, but effort that arises from being drawn, from following what is wholesome and life-giving, and doing this in a way that ends up supporting the well-being of the whole ecosystem. And of course, this will bring us back once again to a practical question, right? What, in human form, helps the seeds of Vīrya to grow? What is it that helps this kind of energy stay connected to our joy and aliveness rather than turning into pressure or obligation? One condition is remembering what we love. Because when we lose contact with what we love, effort can quickly become obligation. This can happen fast, and we might be doing exactly the same thing on the outside, but inwardly, something starts to kind of dry out. So one way we tend to Vīrya is by pausing and reconnecting with that source, the love or the care or the meaning. Some people use the language of devotion underneath that effort. Not as a concept, but as something we can sense by remembering, why does this matter? Or what is this effort in service of? Or maybe, what do I love enough about this to keep showing up? A second condition is confidence. And here I don't mean confidence as certainty, or definitely not kind of an aggressive, overbearing energy, or even believing that we can do everything all at once. I mean that quiet confidence that supports us in taking the next doable step. Because as Śāntideva taught, one of the greatest obstacles to Vīrya is discouragement. That voice that many of us will be very familiar with that says, I can't do this, or maybe it won't matter, or I'm not enough. Other people are so much more qualified. And the remedy here is not forcing ourselves into some false belief that we can fix it all, we can do it all. That mind over matter, it's not that. Instead, it's sensing what is doable right now. What is it? And can I trust that sincere effort in whatever volume is available, when offered with love, matters, even when I cannot control anything about the outcome? Third condition is joy in the doing, or we might call this play. So this is what the otter points us towards. Also what Śāntideva evoked with that image of a child absorbed in play. So not joy as a forced upbeat kind of positiveness or cheerfulness. Not pretending that the work is easy, but the aliveness that comes when we are not only pushing towards an outcome, but participating fully, really engaged with life. So if that word play or the word joy bring up a little, it's quite a common thing to have a little bit of resistance or maybe confusion or disconnection from those words. You can also consider this as curiosity or creativity, responsiveness, wholeheartedness is another good word. When this kind of joy is present, effort becomes way, way more sustainable. So we're not just trying to get somewhere or get something done. We're in relationship with life and enjoying the journey as it unfolds. One more. So finally, there's rest. And this one is absolutely essential. Joyful engagement cannot be sustained from a state of depletion. It doesn't matter how much we love it. It doesn't matter how much it matters to us. When we are exhausted, even what once called us, what once did draw us towards it in a good way, can easily start to feel like just one more thing on the list. One more demand, one more responsibility, one more thing being asked of us. So rest is definitely not separate from Vīrya. It is a crucial component. I might even say the foundation that allows effort to stay connected to joy rather than becoming pressure or proving or turning into collapse. And just to be clear, I want to make sure I'm very clear. These conditions are not another self-improvement project or some way of grading ourselves. They're ways of tending the soil so that the seed of Vīrya can grow in a way that is courageous and joyful and wise and sustainable. So as we gather all of this, we see that Vīrya is not simply more or less effort. It's a different relationship with effort. It's the wholesome energy that keeps us showing up for what matters without avoiding or shutting down or burning out. And when we notice that our effort has become tight or joyless or even extractive, and this is going to come up, this will happen, rather than seeing it as a failure, we can simply recognize it as a signal. So it's a signal to pause and then tend the conditions again. To remember what we love. To reconnect with confidence in a way that helps us take that next doable step. To make room for play and curiosity. To rest before we reach a state of depletion. And to trust that sincere effort, when it is rooted in joy, is worthwhile, even when the outcome is entirely uncertain. So as we turn towards the practice today, we'll connect to some area of life that asks for our energy. I'm going to invite you to reflect on this. So something you care about, but that may also be feeling at this time kind of tiring. Maybe there's a quality of pressure, or there's some depletion. We're going to notice how that quality of effort lives in the body. And then we will sense what conditions might help Vīrya to grow. So not a practice of a particular outcome, but as a practice of tending to that energy of joyful engagement. Okay? So let's practice, my friends. And I know I've been speaking for a while here, so please care for yourself. You can prepare the body for a period of stillness in whatever way you need. And then settling into a posture that allows you to feel a balance of being awake and supported with room for ease. When you're ready, you can allow the eyes to close or maybe soften the gaze. And we'll begin by tuning in to the felt sense of this body. Perhaps scanning through the body and noticing if there are any obvious areas of tightness, tension. And then discovering what might want to let go or loosen, even a little bit. You might invite a sense of softness and ease to the face. All the little muscles around the eyes, cheeks, the mouth. Relaxing the jaw. Allowing the shoulders to fall away from the ears. Shoulder blades melting down the back. Letting there be softness in the heart and the belly. The arms and the hands. Noticing the places that the body is in contact with the surface beneath you. And then softening into that support. Just allowing your body to become heavy, held. And from whatever parts of you are in contact with that surface beneath you, I'll invite you to visualize growing roots. And imagining those roots stretching down, down, far into the earth. Anchoring you to this moment like a deeply rooted tree. And perhaps on the next in-breath, you can envision receiving a flow of that steady, grounded, wise earth energy flowing up through those roots, feeling it fill you. And then on the exhale, releasing anything that doesn't serve you and letting it flow down through those same roots. trusting the earth to hold and metabolize it without any stress or strain. And from this deeply rooted place, I'll invite you to bring to mind some area of your life that is asking for your energy. So something you care about that matters, but also something that may right now be feeling tiring. Or maybe there's some sense of pressure or obligation to keep pushing. It doesn't need to be the biggest, hardest thing, just something real and present in your life. And once you have a sense of it, just letting yourself gently hold it in awareness. Noticing how this type of effort lives in the body. So not the story about it, but that felt sense. Maybe there's some quality of tightness or a bracing, squeezing. There could also be openness or an aliveness, even alongside the effort, that push. Maybe it's both in different places. So just noticing with as much honesty and as little judgment as you can. Letting the body show you exactly what is true right now. And allowing that truth to belong. And now that you're familiar with how it is right now, I'm going to invite you to sense what conditions here might be nourishing in helping Vīrya, that quality of a joyful engagement, to grow. Maybe it's a reconnection with why this matters or what you love about it. Could need confidence. So not certainty, but just a sense of the next doable step. Maybe it needs more joy in the doing, more play, curiosity, creativity, letting go of the outcome. Or maybe it's rest, that real deep replenishment. So no need to search here for an answer or see it like a solution. Just creating some space to open and listen, and letting whatever arises be received with interest and care. Where it feels accessible, you might envision offering what is needed in this moment. Sometimes it can help to put a hand on the body where you feel that need the most. And then just envisioning it flowing, or committing to offering it when you can. And then noticing what happens as you do this, how the body responds to this deep attention and tending and care. And now gently widening the circle of awareness to sense that the quality of how you engage, so not just what you do, but the care and the aliveness you bring, ripples outwards in ways you may never fully see. But just like the otter, who has no idea that it is tending the kelp forest, but trusts and joyfully engages with what draws it. And just opening for a moment to that quality of belonging to the world. drawn towards what you love. Participating in the web of life with whatever aliveness is available today. So feeling that truth of interbeing. And letting yourself be awake to it. And in these last moments of our practice, I'll invite you to release any images or questions and simply return to the body, breath, and that vast, spacious awareness that flows through and fills you, surrounds you. And taking a moment just to rest there. We'll close with a poem called Famous by Naomi Shihab Nye. The river is famous to the fish. The loud voice is famous to silence, which knew it would inherit the earth before anybody said so. The cat sleeping on the fence is famous to the birds, watching him from the birdhouse. The tear is famous, briefly, to the cheek. The idea you carry close to your bosom is famous to your bosom. The boot is famous to the earth, more famous than the dress shoe, which is famous mostly to floors. The bent photograph is famous to the one who carries it, and not at all famous to the one who is pictured. I want to be famous to shuffling men who smile while crossing streets, to sticky children in grocery lines, famous as the one who smiled back. I want to be famous in a way a pulley is famous, or a buttonhole. Not because it did anything spectacular, but because it never forgot what it could do.